that compassed me. The assembly of the wicked have enclosed me. They pierced my hands and my feet. I count all my bones. They look, they stare at me. They part my garments among them and cast lots on my clothes. Eli, Eli, lama, azamtani, my God, why have you forsaken me? Oh, that clip wasn't even ready. No fade. All right, so we're in 1 Corinthians chapter 7, verse 25. We discussed fornication. You know, there were questions come up about marriage, and they had problems with fornication. It's an odd thing that they had questions like, is it, well, I mean, doubtless in Corinth, there were those who were outraged, right? And anytime you're in church and there's like some scandal, there's always some people who know what ought to happen. There's always some people who know what should be done. But that's not always what ends up happening by any means. And so, you know, there's an interesting conflict about, you know, we have this issue of some pretty scandalous fornication going on in the midst of the church. And at the same time, they have questions about, is it okay to marry? And I'm sure that, you know, well, it sort of comes down to like, if it's more righteous to be celibate, then maybe that's just what we should all do. And he's going to address general celibacy now. Now concerning virgins, I have no commandment of the Lord. Yet I give my judgment, as one that hath obtained mercy of the Lord, to be faithful. I suppose, therefore, that this is good for the present distress. I say that it is good for a man so to be. Art thou bound to a wife, seek not to be loosed. Art thou loosed from a wife, seek not a wife. But, and if thou marry, thou hast not sinned. If a virgin marry, she hath not sinned. Nevertheless, such shall have trouble in the flesh, but I spare you. He's not going to go into that, I believe. I spare you that. Okay, yeah. And he goes into, you know, because here's the thing is like, on some level, you trying to control this is really, you know, going into all the troubles of it. There's no use to spooking people away from it. I mean, you should caution people to go into marriage advisedly, for sure. But what he's saying is, because of the, you know, the present distress, in times of distress, it's much better not to be tied down to a family, right? Just where the rubber meets the road is the truth. One of the things Jesus said is, woe to them that are with child and to them that give suck in those days. In the times of the great tribulation, and in any time of trouble, it really sucks to have a baby, okay? You don't want, like, having a baby in the midst of a war, an evacuation, a plague, a general distress, any kind of chaos, having to also care for an infant, or for a man, if that's for the woman, but for a man to be burdened with a woman who carries an infant. I mean, a man by himself is a very powerful and independent entity who can do many things. And women also who are not burdened with children also have certainly they have much more power over just where they go, what they do. The thing is, women always have a different difficulty in times of distress because they are just generally more vulnerable. Without the protection of the legal system, women are, when they're not protected by law, look around the world, when they're not protected by the law, and by the state. They are abused and taken advantage of by wicked men and wicked women, by wicked people. I say men because, in a sense, but so are children. Whoever is weak and easily preyed upon is taken advantage of. When there's no, when there's no government enforcing of laws that provide equal protection for people and process of law and justice for to be brought down on those who oppress and extort people. Without that, the world is dangerous. But it's a lot less perilous if you are single and celibate. As a man. And in times of distress, and the church is in a certain amount of distress in his time because, he's trying to preach the gospel and there are a lot of people trying to stop him. And, Paul will be stoned. And he, at some point, delineates like all the things that happened to him, all the persecutions that came upon him. And it's not fun. But it's a lot less fun if you have to drag your wife and children through it, But that's, the Lord can provide protections and the mercy that we can pass through those things unscathed to some degree, but there's can provide and will provide is not, whatever is best for your ultimate salvation is what's going to happen, not what's most comfortable for you right now. Remember, it is given on the behalf of Christ to us to suffer for his name's sake, not only to believe. Faith is merely a part of a larger picture, which you've signed on to as a Christian. And part of that is you've consented that you may suffer. Sometimes, I where was I? At some point, there was, a play, I remember, it's funny because my wife woke me up and she was telling me about, the autoplay feature, what would come on after me on her autoplay feature, and it was some prophecy update garbage, and she was marveling at the absolute just horror of it, okay? How horrific yet mundane. Nice looking old man, looks like a nice guy, but he's a false prophet, False prophets come to you in sheep's clothing. They don't come in other, they rarely come with their all dressed in black with wicked looking eyes, and they always come nice and they come sweet. Yeah, they say things you want to hear. Anyways, but aside from that, I was on an autoplay feature not too long ago, and it came up some song, and it was some typical sappy Christian song, and it was just how the grace of God is just, what was it? It wasn't just amazing grace or something like that, which is amazing. Grace is amazing. But it was saying something like, there's no end of it. Grace is just, there's no end to your grace. I was like, well, that's not true. It's not true. God's grace has limitations. He doesn't extend it to everyone and in every situation. Read the Gospels. His grace doesn't extend to you showing up at his wedding feast not having on a wedding garment. You know what I mean? You push him far enough, you take him for granted, and you'll find you're at the short end of grace. Grace doesn't extend to you being I don't want to name call, to us being in any way, to take him for granted and to count the blood of Christ as an unclean thing. Let's just say it like that. Use the scriptures. There are limitations. And the thing is, though, it is not a limitation on God's mercy if you suffer. That's the things that people confuse. Because they think that, there's no limit on God's grace. When you say that, it's like, well, then I can do anything. I can do as the beginning of this chapter. Well, a man could have his father's wife. Grace knows no bounds. Oh, well, so then shut up with your song. Don't sing that garbage. Don't sing that stuff that doesn't make sense. If a man cannot have his father's wife, if a man cannot, there's all kinds of sins they forbid in church that are, but there's all the ones they all confess to being sinners, yet they don't want to specify. There's all kinds of reasons not to break fellowship with people. But then again, there's all these other types of sins which are definitely forbidden. I don't know. It's just the hypocrisy and also the lightness. I really despise lightness. I do. I despise it. Don't take this up lightly. Because it might involve you getting killed for your own good. So don't take it lightly. You got to understand what you signed up for. Concerning virgins, I have no commandment of the Lord. I mean, God, this is not something God has ordered, but in my opinion, as one who has obtained mercy, to be faithful to that, to his celibacy. The way he talks about it, you can see he really likes the idea of being celibate. Paul is very much in favor of it, but he's also a preacher of truth, and there is no sin in being married. And not, I think today the pendulum has swung in the other direction, where the old gag is there's a lot of gags in movies and stuff of, not movie, but like of the older woman who's trying to get the young couple to get married. As far as no, not the young couple to get married. That's not what I mean. The young unmarried person trying to find someone for them. I found someone for you. Oh, he's great, or she's great. Always trying to hook them up with somebody in the hopes that they'll get married. I don't want to, trying to interfere with someone's just celibate life. They really want people to get married, so they try to push relationships. And and marriage is good and honorable. God knows, when I was 20, I knew when I was younger than that, but from very early on, I knew I wanted to be married, because that was the avenue of that one could still be a righteous man and still have a woman. At least that was my mindset. I wanted to find a woman and be married, and then that would be good, because I knew celibacy was not for me. It wasn't going to work. I couldn't be faithful to that. And so, in times of distress, though, it's good to be by yourself. I think about it from time to time. It's like, and it's rough, because it's like my kids are starting to get old enough where I don't have to worry about them so much, right? They're not children. At least they can take care of themselves. They can be assets in times of trouble. It's always good to have, I've got 7 sons, so it's good to have the extra muscle around. And, and so there's that. But there's also down the road, eventually there's going to be grandkids. That's something else for you to worry about. Their well-being in times of trouble. But the thing is, here's the thing. It never ends. That's why Paul's like, look, I'm not going to... If a virgin marries, she has not sinned. Nevertheless, she'll have trouble in the flesh. But I spare you all that. I won't spare you. She has trouble in the flesh. She's got to think about her children. You sign up for a whole heap of responsibility. Like I said, when both my wife and I were young, we both considered that path. The most obvious celibate paths that I grew up knowing was the priesthood, and for her it was, I'll be a nun. We both thought the same things. I was like, I'll be a priest. She's like, I want to become a nun. But But being married creates carnal troubles because you're in a carnal union. He that is joined to the harlot is one with the harlot, but he that is joined to his wife is one with her. So you're not just your own anymore, you belong to somebody else. Not only that, you have children you're responsible for. And you have all these carnal concerns. You've got to look after their welfare. It's something you are bound to do. It's even, it's a godly burden that one receives by having a family, but one is not obligated to take up. You could live a celibate single life. You don't have to take up that burden. A lot of people shouldn't because they fail to carry it. Or they should get themselves straightened out and carry the burden, and be part of their family, to whatever degree they're failing at that. And so he's saying, in the terms of the time of distress, look, do you have a wife? Seek not to be loosed. That's not cool. No, that's an important thing. I was talking about the other day. If you're married to an unbeliever, you're not trying, not only are you not supposed to divorce her, but you're not supposed to seek to get rid of her. That's not being faithful. The idea, you're supposed to be faithful to your marriage bond once you've made it, and unless they insist on departing from you, and then you're not in bondage. And I would also say, if they depart from you, you're also not in bondage in the sense you can marry again and it isn't adultery. When Jesus said something like, he that puts her away causes her to commit adultery, and whoever marries her that is divorced commits adultery. It's because they were thinking that it was righteous, that a man could be a godly-minded man, and he could just put away his wife and take another, or, let's just say he could put his wife away and take another wife for whatever cause he liked, and still be a godly-minded, righteous man in the sight of God and in the brethren. And Jesus was saying, no, you're not righteous. That's not righteous. That's not what righteousness looks like. But when the ungodly puts away the godly are not under bondage in that sense. They are not, all manner of sins and transgressions which men commit can be forgiven. And if there is something transgressive about divorce, if you are the one suffering it, you certainly, whatever mistakes you may have made, if it's primarily the other person who wants this and is doing it, you're absolutely forgiven. Be loosed from your obligations. It's not, you're not under bondage in that circumstance. Are you loose from? Are you free? Don't try to And he's saying this not hey. Like I said, when I was 20, I sought out a wife, and I don't think this had anything to do with me. I sought a wife because he's talking about the current situation. And also he said, this is what I'm saying, not the Lord. Okay? In the current distress, you have a wife, don't try to dump her because it's distress. And if you are free, don't go running around looking to find a wife necessarily. In times when it's not a good idea to get married in the middle of a war. I mean, literally in the middle of a war. I mean, there's always wars going on. We're in the middle of a war right now. Or at the end of one, maybe. Where are we? We're at war somewhere. That can't be good. We should not always be at war. That's one thing I'd really love to see end. At least for our country. Okay. But if thou marry, thou hast not sinned. If the virgin, I almost don't like him putting in these terms. If you've married, you have not sinned. Not only have you not sinned, you've taken a step into something that is, you've taken on a challenge and a burden, which is commendable. Your marriage is commendable. It is a righteous thing to do, because it is different than fornication that you're making a fundamental commitment. You're committing your very life. It's dangerous, but who admire? Don't admire people who don't take on any risk. People who never take on risk, those are cowards. And though I wouldn't make a risky marriage necessarily, but any marriage is risky, even to the best of people. There's going to be natural disagreements, misunderstandings, because it's a human interaction, and so we should go into it with our eyes open and with the expectation that it's going to be a challenge, especially when you're young. When I was young, I was hardly developed as a human being. I was barely an adult. At 18, 19, 20, I thought I was an adult. Thought I had grown up. But I was just a child who was been declared something that they weren't. Even through my 20s, I remember when we had our first children, it's like, we were basically children having children. My first child was born, I think I was 24. No, wait. I think 7, well, yeah. No, he was born, I was 23. Right? Yeah, that was the year I turned 24. So there's a lot of trouble you have in the flesh from having children. And I discovered that, sick children, financial, you got to provide for these people. You don't just have to feed. It's pretty easy to feed yourself. You can work almost, they complain about the wages and stuff. One person can live, and two, even if you're not married and having children, or even if you're just married and not having children, two can live as cheaply as one, as they say. Especially if they're both working, it can become, there's all kinds of at home, you don't use much more electricity. The rent, you don't pay any more for rent for two people to live together. There's a lot of advantages to being married in that case. The only thing that sort of doubles is your food, but a lot of other things go together. Like, you don't use twice as much electricity for two people. You don't use twice as much housing for two people. You don't use twice as much. You probably don't use twice as much utilities beyond electricity. But I mean, there's certain things that certainly the housing and electricity is a big deal. That comes together, and that definitely cuts your costs. This I say, brethren, the time is short. It remaineth that both they that have wives be as though they had none, and they that weep as though they wept not, and they that rejoice as though they rejoice not, and they that buy as though they possess not, and they that use this world as not abusing it, for the fashion of this world passeth away. So I'm gonna go through this slightly and then go on to the next verse, because I think it contains a little more understanding. The time is short. There's not a lot of time. It remaineth. What does that mean? Remaineth there. Verse 29. Actually, a long chapter here. It remaineth. Are, belong, call, come, consist. Yeah, because it sounded like weird. Like, it doesn't mean there's leftover, but I think it's using it in a kind of a conjunctive sense. I mean, it's connecting things. I like consists. What he's saying basically, this is how it's got to be, though that have wives, they that have wives be as though they had not. Sometimes, sometimes we're called in time, like when Jesus was on the earth. people literally forsook all and followed him. If the end times began and the trumpets sounded, and then the distress of nations, the sea and the waves roaring, men's hearts failing them for fear, and for looking after those things which are coming upon the earth, aside from all the distress, God might call you and say, go to this city and preach to them and whatever. Go and stretch your hand over the waters and poison them. That's pretty. What I'm saying is that the prophets are called often to do things, right? And then what happens to their family? Well, they get left behind. And you have to trust that the Lord will take care of them. In general, you are responsible to take care of them. So it's like, I want to caution people against getting this idea that they're like, well, I'm just going to leave my family and serve God. I just feel the calling. A lot of times what they feel is they're using the Lord as an excuse to abandon their responsibilities. If you want to serve the Lord, show first that you can rule your own house well. If there's not an extraordinary calling, you know what I mean? An extraordinary calling, you're not allowed to just walk away. You need an extraordinary calling. You better be called to be working miracles or bring down plagues. I suppose that's something I shouldn't say in public, but whatever. It's like it's written publicly in the Bible. These have power to shut heavens. He may call you to say, go to the city and shut the heavens, that it rain not in the days of your prophecy. And I give you power over waters to turn them to blood, and to smite the earth with all plagues as often as you will. There may not be time for family in those distressing times. And though they that weep as though they wept not. Sometimes there's no time for mourning. In the great times, it's like, like in war, a lot of times your friend dies and you just keep fighting. Keep going. There's no time to spend too concerned about that, lest you join him before your time. They that rejoice as if they rejoice. There's times when, though you have cause for celebration, no time for celebration. This is not the time. Remember, isn't that what he started saying? For the present time, for the present distress, it is good for a man so to be. And then he says, the time is short, it remaineth. It has to do with time. Everything is beautiful in its time. There's a time for rejoicing, and sometimes during the time of rejoicing, it's no rejoicing. Cause to rejoice, but you can't do it. Don't have time for rejoicing. We just got to. They that buy as though they possess not. It has to do with buying and selling and commerce. Sometimes you may be called to give away all the commercial goods you have. You may be required to act as though it belongs to you. That all God has given you is not really yours. But I've worked so hard for it. If you're a servant of Christ, you work for the Lord. And ultimately, all you have is liable to be called upon to be sacrificed. What do you think? Offer up your bodies as living sacrifices to God. What do you? If your body as a sacrifice is a reasonable service to God, how much more do you suppose he regards all your other possessions as potential sacrifices? Oh, they are potential sacrifices. They are all absolutely up for grabs as far as God's concerned. He can take things that you think you possess and lay them out and say, now you must give them up. So remember, everything we have is given us of God. That's what, read Job. Naked I came into the world, and naked I go out. Blessed be the name of the Lord. All that I have, I've been given by God. Even the things I've earned with my sweat and toil, God gave me the power to do that. He made me strong in mind and body so that I could obtain those things. Gotta remember where my blessings come from. And God is not, and here's the thing, it's like, we only think of the lost, and we forget not what we gain by being faithful servants of God. Life eternal, life everlasting. But not only that, He is faithful. And He gives us more than life everlasting. He gives us Himself even. I went too far here. And they that use the world as not abusing it. We have to use the world to some degree, right? We use the world. But it can turn into abuse. And we have to, when we use it, we are given a certain amount of license, liberty. Let's say liberty. License is a little more broad of a term. That's what we're given, liberty to use the world. And to some, to some people, it might be regarded as abuse. I mean, I have the liberty to watch Hollywood movies. I don't really spend money on it, but I can watch a movie. I used to rent movies from time to time, and you could say in a sense why? What's the purpose? Some people are find that very objectionable. I don't watch everything. There's some things I find interesting or want to watch. There's certainly some great films being created. I love historical dramas. I do. Anything that's based on history, even loosely, I find fascinating, especially if it's trying to be accurate, and the older the better. The thing, it doesn't hurt to be appraised of cultural developments. I don't go into a lot of that. I could, and I'm probably more aware of cultural things than I even let on as far as talking about it, because this isn't about culture. This is about the Word of God. I'm thinking about starting a channel where I talk more about, because I did the fatherhood thing, and I think I might split that off into a separate channel, but that's another conversation. So I want to do more of that, but I'm appraised. But, on some level, it could be an excuse just to entertain myself. I could say on one hand, well, I'm using it to get a sense of where the world is so I can preach effectively to those who are trapped in the world. It doesn't hurt to know about what people care about. It doesn't hurt to know about what the world is running after. But there can be a degree to which you yourself end up caught up in it. You know what I mean? Like news reporters, to find out about, mafia, they might go and embed themselves with some mafia people to learn about stuff, but in the process, they could get embroiled in that, and and know too much. There are a lot of ways. And I was just thinking one thing in particular where I heard a story about a guy who kind of, part of research, he got involved with organized crime. And so, we shouldn't deceive ourselves and call it research when we're really just entertaining ourselves. And so, when we use the world, there's a time where we have liberty, and it's kind of acceptable in the time of peace. I'm not all work and no play, though I don't want to misrepresent myself. I'm not all work and no play. No, I'm not. But we ought to be mostly work, right? We ought to work mostly and not seek our own pleasure. But sometimes we are doing things purely for pleasure's sake. Like, let's rest, let's relax and enjoy a movie, or maybe like a TV show. And you could justify it saying like, well, I'm not, I can't go out of the world. If I were to avoid keeping company with fornicators, I'd have to leave the world. And so, also the things I use in the world, it's part of being in the world, and it makes me ultimately more knowledgeable of the people around me, and it could conceivably help me in being able to relate to them. Because sometimes I think people get so, it's true, I think this is true, that I've seen people who are so embedded in what I'd call the Christian culture that it's almost like they come from a foreign country when they talk to worldly people. Like they can't speak their language. They don't understand. You know what I mean? Like I was watching. I did a video on that guy Jordan Peterson. And I watched him appear at, I think it was Liberty University. It was a Christian university. It was Oral Roberts. Oral Roberts? No, it was the Moral Majority guy, I think. Jerry Falwell, I think. His, I think it was his legacy. And, people often associate him wrongly with some of the other, because he was a name. He isn't, Jimmy Swaggart or Jim Baker. He's Jerry Falwell, fundamentalist, no doubt. But they were talking to him, and there was one guy on the stage who just could not, he couldn't just talk. It always had to be like overtly, there was something very, I use the word ostentatious, very much, I'm so very Christian, and it felt forced, I guess, in my opinion. Like it was so, just, like he was worried that the name of Jesus might get lost in the conversation. Or something like that. I don't know. It's hard to put my finger on it. I was thinking about doing like a little video like commentary on it, because I watched it, I'm like, why does this bug me a bit? Because I don't like to shoehorn in Jesus in an uncomfortable way in a situation where it doesn't belong. I like to have doors of utterance open to me. I don't try to cram my Christianity down people's throats. I live it, I work it. Because like I said, I think preaching the gospel is important, but, people around me all believe in Jesus. So it's like, well, you believe in Jesus? I get a Bible study, which I recommend, and you see how few people listen to it. But as my wife noted, if you want to watch Prophecy Update with Old Man in a Beard and False Prophecy, why, there's thousands of people watching that live stream. So, and I don't expect differently. See, I don't expect it to be different. Why would I expect that? So, anyways, that's a long roundabout way. But what I'm saying is, like, sometimes you're so unfamiliar with the world that you don't even know how to interact with it. That's not good. But you don't want to abuse the liberty you have to use the world. You know what I'm saying? Maybe I haven't used a lot of great examples, but we have a certain amount of liberty to use the world. All right? Take this from it. We have a liberty to use the world, and we should be careful not to abuse that. For the sake of research or whatever, careful. Don't become swallowed up to the thing you're researching. Understanding the world, it's not that hard. You don't have to use that much world to figure the world out. It's not very complicated. As far as I don't know, like I said. So I listen to people who are contrary. I listen to voices that are, not my own. Like I said, but I don't, like I've often said, I don't listen to a lot of Christian teachers. Certainly not ones I disagree. Ones I disagree with. I guess I don't listen to, what I do is I listen to people who write me letters. And I engage with plenty of people who disagree with me. But I don't sit and listen to a lot of Christian preachers because there's no engagement. In fact, someone was talking about this. Like, they were talking about the new secular religions that are emerging, like anti-racism is a kind of religion. Now, I'm not a racist, but for some people, being unracist is almost a religion. And I guess, I think of Christianity. Christianity teaches that there's neither Jew nor Greek, bond nor free, Greek nor Scythian. This is a Christian teaching that in Christ all are one. And that's a far cry from some of the, this divisive stuff you see in politics today where they try to pit one race against the other. I think it's poisonous. But anyways, this guy was talking about that religion. What was it? Well, the new secular religion's rising. What was my point about that? Oh boy, Paul. I forgot what the point was. It was going to be great, I promise you. I promise it was going to be great. The point was, I can't sit around here thinking about it. It'll probably come to me in a minute. So anyways, that just burns me up a bit. That's the nature. You engage in a complicated discussion. It was all in this theme of using the world but not abusing it. Why did I mention that? I almost want to rewind it really quick. What was I talking about? Oh, well. Unfortunate. Maybe it wasn't that great of a thing to say. I thought it was great. I didn't have any apprehension about what I was about to say. So I'm just teasing like that. Okay. For the fashion of this world passeth away. Let's just move on to something else. If we use the things in the world that exist in the world, the fashion thereof is passing away. I'm so distracted about it. Let me have a sip of coffee. That helps. Should have just done this. It's always nice when it's still hot. The world is passing away, so we shouldn't become too attached to it. So if you abuse the world, you run the risk of becoming attached to the world. Remember Lot's wife. She lived in this horrible city of Sodom and Gomorrah, but as she departed, she looked back. She had to look back on its destruction. It's implied that there was some sort of longing to return. Sodom and Gomorrah. It's filled with rapists, but it had such wonderful shops and stores, and my neighbors and friends were such interesting people. As you can guess, I'm still thinking about that. I'm just distracted. I remembered who I was watching, and I was like, I remember that guy's commentary, and I was like, whatever. Lost a train of thought. It's rare that I actually completely lose a train of thought like that, which is funny. Okay, but I would have you without carefulness. I don't want you to be... What does he mean by carefulness? I assume he means something like worry. Verse 32. I'm just looking up in good old Bible Hub. Free from care. Without carefulness is actually one word. It means, I would have you free from care. He that is unmarried cares for the things that belong to the Lord, how he may please the Lord. Being unmarried is that way, is that you don't have the distraction of a family. He that is married cares for the things that are of the world, how he may please his wife. And maybe this is more what Paul had in mind, and it probably is, okay? When you are married, it's probably the best example of something. That we have liberty to be married. And we can be blessed, and that can be sanctified, because God himself said, go forth, be fruitful, and multiply. But it is something of this world. As Jesus said, when they asked him, they said we had this certain brother, and no, there were 7 brothers, and there was this woman, and the first brother married her, and he died, and then the second brother married her, and he died, and all 7 brothers married the same woman, because there was this tradition that if a man got married and he died before he had children, that his brother was supposed to then marry his brother's wife to raise up a son, then have a son that would be that man's heir, to give him a son. And so they said, well, they came up with a scenario where brother after brother keeps dying, and finally the last one died. And then they asked the question, well, then whose wife shall she be in heaven in the resurrection? Because they were saying the resurrection is ridiculous, because you could have wives that belong to 7 different guys. And he's like, you don't understand the scriptures nor the power of God. Because in heaven they neither marry nor are given in marriage, but are as the angels. Meaning, marriage is till death do you part. And in the kingdom of God, there is no marriage of man and woman. Per se, there is no such thing as male and female anymore. It's a very ambiguous thing in the scriptures, as far as it's not detailed like, then what? But it is certainly said that we are as the angels. The angels are often described as young men. And, and I remember a family member of mine just did not like this idea. But it's like, a lot of the sexual dimorphism, which means the things that make the sexes different, a lot of them are unnecessary outside of this carnal existence. Meaning, technically speaking, without babies, women don't need breasts or childbearing hips. And men, if they're not struggling against nature, they don't need all this, the things that make us andromorphic. I might have made that word up, but it means shaped like a man. We don't need big, strong muscles. I almost flexed for the camera. I'm not going to do that. That's stupid. We don't need big, you don't need to have big, physically strong muscles and testosterone coursing through your veins. It's not necessary. So, to the degree that it's unnecessary, one can wonder what exactly we're going to look like. But it's nothing to be too caught up in, because appearances are very, that's not a very important thing. Because we're ultimately, as individuals, as people, we are more, there's a trend in our society, and this doesn't have anything to do with what I was going to talk about, but it had to do with the new, one of the, among the new secular religions, is not just anti-racism, but it's like an anti-discriminatory against every kind of category you could stick someone into. But people categorize themselves based on their sexual tastes. And I understand that can be inborn with people, or it can be something that I don't think anyone is conceived with a genetic, because it doesn't make sense that you would genetically be that way. Otherwise, it would be inheritable. Like, homosexual desires would be inheritable. But it is something that happens to people developmentally that is not a choice. And there's a lot of research that says it has something to do with perhaps the presence of certain hormones in excess in the womb will produce different kinds of structural changes in the way the brain is structured, which makes people more or less susceptible or driven even to certain kinds of sexual deviation from that which is natural. And that's a tragedy. But where Paul calls us to celibacy, I'm a man, and even though I chose to be married, there's no reason that I couldn't live a celibate life. You know what I mean? I know people who do. And I admire them greatly. But at the same time, I know that I would say sometimes, oh, I couldn't do that, but I had planned to do it. I probably couldn't have done that then. You know what I mean? You know, it's like if I like after so long with one person, like if I lost my wife, I would probably stay celibate after that, because it's like you don't want to. I went through all that. I loved it. I loved the experience, but it's like after so long a time, it's like it's not. I don't need somebody else walking into my house. That would be absolutely unacceptable. You know what I mean? So there are reasons that people could stay virgins later. I understand it's a good thing. And what I'm saying about is with these deviations, celibacy is always a possibility. It's like we cannot contain. In the name of Christ, we can all contain ourselves. I'm not saying that someone who doesn't find women attractive needs to be married. You know what I mean? No. No. But any man with the Lord's help can be celibate. And I know for some people that's a bitter pill to swallow. But ultimately, the fashion of this world, sexuality is passing away. Sexuality, marriage, and all that's wrapped up in that. I've often thought it's going to be strange in the kingdom when I encounter the person that was my wife, and I assume that this is still going to be a very important person to me. Because not only are we married, we're great friends. That's my best friend in the world. So it's like, we share so many things other than that. There's so many things that we share in. So, it's like that's, but it is a little, but it's sort of like, we will neither marry there, but there won't be a marriage relationship. It's not like I'm gonna have to watch her be married to somebody else in heaven. You know what I mean? So it's like there's not like going to be that jealousy or the need for jealousy, because there's not going to be those kind of relationships. We will all be married to Christ. That will be the closest relationship anyone has. And it'll be hard to be jealous because we're all going to be in union together with Him. So, if we use the things of the world, we shouldn't abuse it, because sometimes that's the thing, is that, like I said, the calling of God exceeds the calling of marriage. God can override that. Just like He can override the commandment about the Sabbath day, and His disciples could pick corn on the Sabbath day, so also, yes, he that does not look after his own family has denied the faith and is worse than an infidel. Unless God explicitly has directed him to do something else, then it falls to God on some level to, if you would otherwise stay, it falls to Him. You have to trust Him that He will help them find a way, and they will either survive or whatever. Ultimately, their good will be seen to. That when we serve the Lord, we cannot possibly do ill to our family if we are truly serving the Lord. He that is married cares for the things of the world, how to please his wife. There is a difference also between a wife and a virgin. Yeah. The unmarried woman careth for the things of the Lord, how she may be holy both in body and spirit. But she that is married careth for the things of the world, how she may please her husband. Well, he was talking about the wife, the husband. Remember, when he talked about virgin, he talked about women here, but he also he talked about himself. He's like, concerning virgins, I wish everyone was like me. A virgin, Paul. Because in those times, it's like, it was not, families protected their children, their daughters. They were very unlike, fornication was not something it was easy for young people to engage in. And for young men, it would be to see a prostitute. And Paul was a very devout Jew. He wasn't a seer of prostitutes. You know what I mean? He, in his opinion about he that is joined to an harlot is one flesh with her. It's fornication. That's the thing about prostitutes. It's fornication. It's not acceptable. And so the woman, it's the same thing as the man. She cares for the things that she's got to please her husband. It's part. You don't even belong to yourself anymore. Neither the husband or the wife. You owe the other a debt. You have to please them. And so it can be a distraction, especially in troublesome times. It can be. It depends on what the Lord has called you to do. You know what I mean? It's like my wife has always been an aid to me. And I suppose if I didn't have a wife, you could say I would have more ability. Like if I for example, it's not so much the wife because the wife never got in the way, but the children do get in the way. I mean, definitely because we homeschool our kids, so there's that. So I haven't written a lot of songs in the past several years because I've been more involved with their schooling than ever, especially as they went through high school. And as they began to fill in space in my life, there was a lot less time for me to be in the environment which I require to be creative, which means to be alone. I've even got messages from people like imploring me to write more music. And actually, the funny thing is, yesterday I was doing that, but I have to go out. That's why my microphone wasn't here when I started, because I had to go out into the barn to be in the place of solitude I need to be to feel comfortable being creative. Because when you're creative, you have to take risks. You have to try things that don't always sound great, and the words don't fit right, and it's a dirty, messy process sometimes. It's not always just like I have a song, it just comes out perfect on your first try. I don't know if I've ever written a song quite like that. I wrote a couple songs pretty fast. It was like 15 minutes and that was done. That was an inspiration. But a lot of songs write themselves easily. Some things, some passages, especially when you try to tackle something difficult, like a prophecy or something, can be difficult. So the children often are they take up time. You have to pay them attention. And it's because of being married that I have children. So, I mean, it's like, yeah, I got to look after my wife, but she's not really burdensome. My wife has always been especially because she's as zealous a Christian as I am. And that was one of my when I began searching for a wife, that was what I was looking for. Someone who could match my zeal. And compliment I didn't realize, it was more of an after, I'm like, wow, she compliments me so well. And, that was a secondary, that wasn't my first on my mind, but I'm glad the Lord thought of that, because in the way that he brought us together. So she's never been a burden in that sense, except in bearing children. You know what I mean? Like, because then now all of a sudden it's like, it's not the wife itself, but it's like the fact that she has children that she needs me to help her take care of. And it becomes, and early on it was, with the babies and stuff, I wrote tons of songs while my son was in the hospital when he was 7 months old. Because he had but I'm not going to go into that. There was an issue. And then, all the years I had little ones. But then they start taking more time. So using the world, being married, having a family can diminish my ability to serve God. That's true. But on the other hand, I would say that while theoretically I could have served the Lord better by, by having just all my time to myself, right? That's not in reality how it would have worked out. Because I needed someone in my life to help push me in the right direction consistently. Because I'm not always so consistent. I don't know, I can be pretty consistent, but sometimes I need help in certain areas. And the Lord definitely sent me a great helper in those things. So it's not obvious that I would even do as much as I do if I was single. In fact, I might be so distracted by my desire to have a wife still that I'd still be looking. if the Lord hadn't provided one. And it's good he provided one of his choosing. So there are ways in which they are, yes, a burden, but if you marry well, it can be a tremendous asset. That, yes, you still can't achieve maybe the maximum potential, but overall, you will achieve more because you won't be distracted. And Paul's speaking by his opinion. Well, I'm speaking by my opinion. Paul never was married. I have been. I haven't been married and served the Lord. And so he has a very prejudiced point of view as being someone who never was married. And he's right, but there is a subtle nuance to it. It's funny, I'm sitting here contradicting the Apostle Paul, but I really don't mind, because I'm sure Paul would say that's something, I don't know that experience. And that's an interesting thought, that like, it's not just the things you do or could do, but it's like, what would you really do if you didn't have someone assisting you? And being also helping, by giving me my wife. I got locked into teaching the Bible forever, because my original agreement was I needed one person to study with me, and I would do it even with one person. That's why you don't hear me complain about how many people watch the studies, because I only need one person to be, as long as the number isn't 0, And I'm not going to watch it myself for sure, like to prop it up. I'm not going to watch it to prop it up, get a bit of view. As long as I got one person to watch, that's enough. And that's the Lord locked me in. So the wife was doubly useful for me in that regard. And this I speak for your own profit, not that I may cast a snare upon you, but for that which is comely. Comely means like attractive, beautiful, orderly. The word in Greek that is used for beauty, often used for beauty, means like well ordered. Because part of what makes things beautiful is their order. Like the way mathematical equations can be beautiful and the way they work out. Maybe you don't like math, but the way many things in the world are beautiful because they are orderly. Like when a woman combs her hair out, it's beautiful because it's all in a line and blah blah blah. A lot of beauty has to do with things being set in their right, in a way. It's not just orderly, it's in a way that seems right. Like, we have that eye for beauty, is to see that things are in their proper position, proper proportions. They're proportioned and positioned properly. Like it says, everything is beautiful in its time. When the thing fits into the right moment and everything goes into the slot properly, it's beautiful. Comely, and that ye may attend upon the Lord without distraction. So he's speaking this to your prophet. I speak it also. I'm saying also that it is not only better to marry than to burn, but if you marry well, it can enhance your ministry, because some people who would not profit from being celibate. And I think that's something Paul's a little blind to. Yes, it is good you can use the world, but you gotta remember, don't abuse it. Meaning the fact of being married is not, we can't allow that to distract us from serving the Lord. And because, I tell you what, marriage can get a bad rap. It certainly has a bad rap for a lot of people, I think, because of the nature of, I'm hearing myself somewhere. Because of the nature of humans, whether one spouse or the other is worldly or unbelieving, marriage can be a major distraction, okay? And I think Paul may have that in mind also. It's like, are you married to an unbeliever? That's a problem, but don't, if they're pleased to dwell with you, stay, because it's a sin to divorce. But if they want to go, you're not in bondage. On the other hand, I put a big distinction between married to a believer and married to an unbeliever. Is that the last? Oh. Let me just say. But if any man, how many more verses in this chapter? Is that like it? There's too much. We're over. We're an hour, though the time is late. We're only an hour and 4 minutes, which is over. But I try to make up for being late by going over consistently. Okay, so we will begin with verse 36. Wrap this up. We'll probably go into chapter 8 on Monday also. So we'll begin at verse 36 next time. Thanks for joining me in this study. I look forward to studying with you again next time. Oh, whatever, here we go.
But in those days, after that affliction, the sun shall be darkened, and the moon shall not give her light, and the stars of heaven shall fall, and the powers that are in heaven shall be shaken. And then they shall see the Son of Man coming in the clouds with great power and glory. And then shall he send his angels, and shall gather together his chosen from the four winds, from the uttermost part of earth to the uttermost part of heaven.